Hey, welcome to the Dear Creator YouTube channel. My name is Danny Daniela, and on this channel, I focused on healthy conversations, allowing ourselves to explore content in a way that's intentional. And today's episode is inspired by content creators from the Gotta Be Me podcast. I'm going to read from their channel what their podcast is all about, and then I'm going to dig into one of the episodes they recently had that spark conversation for myself. So Gotta Be Me is a podcast hosted by Sophia and Peyton Binion, two passionate young African-American women who are committed to revealing the truth and providing solutions to the oppressions that plague humanity. Now, I just have to say this. I had a request. I needed guidance from God on the content that I wanted to share and how I wanted to share it with those who come across my channel. And I'm looking for that content that is not content that's balanced, where we don't have to offend people, we don't have to come out of our throat to bash people, but we can thoughtfully look at the content, understand what perspective are they coming from? Why are they coming from the perspective? And then present quality questions. And if we are triggered, if it bothers us, for us to go into that journalistic approach of investigating our own thoughts and processes and why we respond to content the way that we do. So if you're interested in watching content in a more intentional way, then this is the place to be. I imagine that there are a lot of people who just want to understand and go through deep conversations. I'm a deep conversation person, and I realized that when I talk to people, I want to get to know people. I want to understand people. And I also do this because I want to understand myself. And as I have grown closer to God, my identity is definitely embedded and my understanding and belief in God. And that's the safest place for me. As I go through this journey, I am very transparent about the questions that I have and the people that I come across and why there's so many diverse thoughts that seem to pull us away instead of us questioning to a point where we come together. So I think today's content is just a breath of fresh air, and for so many different reasons. I'm going to play most of the podcast here, but in the description below, you can join this podcast, look at their content. I actually came across Sophia and Peyton maybe maybe close to the beginning of this year, and I'm only watched maybe 2 videos, and this video came across today. But when I first came across these 2 young women, I just thought, wow. They reminded me of my childhood. When I was growing up, I knew a lot of different homes that were homeschooled. So I had friends that were homeschooled, and I just admired homeschooled children. The homeschooled children that I knew were intelligent, and they were so well versed in the arts, and they just were successful at everything that they do. And it's so interesting because I've heard people capture homeschooled children in a way where they're not socialized, or they don't understand things. And I've never met personally those type of homeschool children. I just seen homeschool children just always excel. And I just begged my mom if I could be homeschooled. It didn't work, but I used to always admire homeschool children. And I can't say for sure if the 2 were homeschooled. I feel like that could be something I'm making up, and I just thought that they had a conversation about it. But that's what they remind me of. It's just when I was a child, being around the homeschool children, it's just a difference. And if they aren't homeschooled, I expect that beyond the public education, if that was the case, their parents did an excellent job making sure that they were educated. And that's one of the topics that I want to talk about in today's podcast review of these 2 creators having a discussion about Candace Owens. We're going to watch together because I'm going to talk about this a lot before we actually play it. So as we play it, I'm going to have a few questions through the pause. And this is the moments and times where if you want to take out a journal and just jot that question down, or if any content that comes up inspires you to think in a different way, for you to take note of it and to explore these things. And this is just on the surface level, trying to dig out quality questions. If you ever hear something and you think, this is disturbing, or this makes me mad, or this makes me angry, or I hate that person, or they get on my nerves, let's try to figure out why. And once we figure out why, is there anything else that we can learn about the way that we behave and we respond to these things that can put us in a better position? So boom, bam, bam. We're going to get to the video now.
Hi, welcome back to Gotta Be Me podcast. We're so happy and excited to be here again with you today. We're your hosts. My name is Sophia Benyon, and this is my cousin, Peyton Benyon.
Welcome back to our channel, everybody. If you are new here, please do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you are old here,
I think we've always wanted to talk about this topic that we're about to talk about, and that's why we always said we wouldn't. Because we really wanted to, but we were scared to. So we said, we will never talk about Miss Candace Owens because she intimidates us somewhat. We admire her intelligence and her quick wit and her boldness and the fact that she has her own extremely successful show. And we're like, we don't want her coming for us because she just has a way of making her opponents look unintelligent. And I wouldn't consider us her opponents.
No,
you know what I'm
all.
saying? But I don't know. I just don't want her coming for us. Been thinking about her and talking about her, and amongst ourselves, we're like, we're not going to do it on the set.
So I'm going to pause here because there's so much packed in what their intro is here. And a lot of it has to do with, a fear of a person based off of this intellect. And I too think that Candace Owens is a very intelligent person. She's very quick for responses. She has all of her data together. And one thing I would note is people are people. People are people. The fear of other people because of their intellect or because of their standing in this world is the interesting thing. I can't think of a better word because I didn't get homeschooled, but it's interesting because I imagine that these intelligent people are so intelligent, and sometimes that makes it so they can't really interact with the human emotions. They're always looking at things in fact, and so there's a disconnect. And I don't believe this is for all intelligent people. Actually, these two young ladies, I feel like they have a really good balance between the two. And they're able to be thoughtful and they're mindful in the way that they present themselves and also showcase so much intelligence at the same time. And this is why I would say this is balanced content, because we'll see throughout the rest of this video, but it's that balance between intellect and empathy and care and mindfulness about the entire picture. And this is what I would hope for anyone who is a journalist, anyone who is putting out content or thoughts or ideas, is that once we are passionate about something, we're angry and we want to say all these things, can we take a space and realize that there's a different angle that we could not dig into because we're so sold on our own belief system and thoughts that would be more powerful if we took the time to listen. So for instance, I was taking in content from people who sit in the Candace Owens space, like a Charlie Kirk, a Ben Shapiro, a Matthew, I don't remember his last name, but he did a documentary about women. And when I see them interact with other people, maybe it's like, they call them like a woke college children or what have you, I notice that the only people that we see are people who don't have that grit to be able to move forward with these debaters, because they're not taking the time to study. They don't have the time to study, but they just have this emotion and feeling. They know something is wrong. They just don't even know how to articulate it. And we're just looking for these people who know how to articulate it, to have a thoughtful, meaningful conversation to help other people realize that there's something that you're missing here. I know that you're saying this X, Y, and Z in these very blanket statements and saying that your side is the right side. But can you sit and consider that these are the reason why these things are happening without shifting blame? So when I think about politics, and I'm just digging into this conversation of politics, just a few this week, but I mean, just for a little this week. But when I think about how we interact in the politic world, I just think that we are just childish. And I don't see how anybody can look at what's going on and how people go back and forth and make fun of each other and whine and blame and don't see that there's a disconnect and there's a lack of listening. But if anyone should go against Candace Owens, not even go against, I think they would just have a thoughtful conversation. So go against, let's take it out. But having a thoughtful conversation and presenting quality questions, I think these two would be really good at it. So if by chance, because you see Candace Owens in the title and Candace Owens' team happen to see this, I am backing the conversation with Gotta Be Me and Candace Owens.
But we got brave, especially after Brother Steph encouraged us. He was like, you should talk about Miss Candace. I think she would like you. I think she would want to talk to you all. We were like, you don't? And we would love to talk to her, you know? So
I think it would be a mutual liking both ways.
Tag Miss Candace Owens in the comments. We would love to talk to her. But we're so interested in some of her perspectives and theories and theologies and doctrines.
Yeah, she's a very opinionated, passionate woman.
And just outspoken.
I really admire that about her. Because sometimes I get scared to say strong opinions because then if I have to go back later, it's going to be like really embarrassing. Like, but it's my friends and family, I'm like so passionate. I say the most out of
Yes, you do. Yes, she does. I be having to check Peyton for real.
Yeah, I just, if I get mad, it's just everything's coming out that I meant and didn't mean. But I mean, Miss Candace Owens is not like that at all. She's very reasonable.
But she does make very strong statements.
Very big,
But what I do appreciate about her is that it seems that when she does realize truth, she's willing to say.
She always moves along. Yeah.
That wasn't true.
I remember she was talking to Larry Elder, and she said, basically, I've grown up with people watching my convictions form. And that's just like kind of a tough space to be in, right? Like and people watching you find yourself right in front of the cameras.
Right. And we kind of feel that a little bit because, a little bit. I mean, here we are doing the same thing with a much smaller audience. But you brought up Larry Elder. When me and Peyton watched that, we were so very traumatized.
Yeah, absolutely.
We actually were shouting at each other. Like, what are they saying?
Like, some of the reactions I went through initially, so I was listening to it, and then I was frustrated, right? Because it knocked off some of the foundational things or strong things that I would believe, and I'd be like, what are they saying? But then I realized, they're speaking facts.
They were speaking facts. They had data. They had statistics and analysis. And if you research this, it says that. They had so much of that.
And it's like very scary looking, like all on the surface, right?
But it made us realize actually how manipulated facts can be and misrepresented. Because just because you have some truth doesn't mean you have the truth.
Absolutely.
And facts, as true as they can be, still doesn't mean you understand the narrative.
It does not bring
or the story of what's going on. But the thing about Miss Owens is I think she understands a whole lot more than she might give off in some of those conversations like she did in the one with Larry Elder, which
let's talk about facts. And I think this is a really, really good pull out because we're looking at facts, we're looking at data. This is usually how Candace Owens and people who are associated in Candace Owens space, they get a point in cookies because there's a lot of facts that they can bring to the table. And someone who works with data, I realized that really data can tell any story, right? It really can show you any story. The way that you put the data together, the way that the set that you're using, the fact that some of the set might be missing people who you want to hear from. There's just a lot of different places where data can tell you a narrative that might not be the case. But this is the question I want to put on the screen for you all to consider. How do we distinguish between facts and larger narratives that we create? Have you ever encountered a situation where facts were used to present a misleading story? How can we become better at identifying underlying narratives and information we consume? All right, let's go back into it.
That's been 5 years ago. So I don't know. I would give her credit that maybe some of her opinions have changed. I wouldn't know.
Absolutely. Something that really stuck out to me in the whole conversation speech is that she does not believe in systemic racism.
That's that. Me too.
And that was just really odd to me in the context of some of the things she said in the past and some of the things she said recently.
Mm-hmm.
So we have her like sticking up for a couple years ago, I think 2021, she stuck up for Nicki Minaj because Nicki Minaj spoke negatively about Big Pharma.
Oh, okay. She said something negative about the vaccine.
Something negative about the vaccine, and Cardi said,
no, Candace, Miss Owens.
Anything with the C. Candace, she said, you go, girl. I mean, you speak your truth. And she kind of said Nicki Minaj was very brave for standing up against liberal media. And that's kind of how she would portray it. But I mean, Nicki Minaj, right? She's speaking about a system that would take advantage, right? Pharmaceutics.
Right.
Is a very big system.
Pharma is a system.
Right.
It's a, and okay, so there was that. But then even just in her conversation with Larry Elder, they talked about the education system.
Right.
And they talked about the entertainment system. You could call it industry or system.
Right.
And they talked about family systems. And they talked about government systems.
I mean, and they honestly talked about systemic lack of fathers in the Black community.
Or they talked about a lack of fathers in the Black community, but somehow they somehow came to the conclusion that it wasn't systemic, which I don't understand how you can deny a system and look at that fact that there's a lack of Black fathers in the community.
And
like to me, either there's a system causing that, because it's obviously not one person and it's not individual choice.
Like everyone recognizes there is a problem,
right,
with fatherhood in the Black community.
That's like both Larry Elder and that's not who we're here talking about, and Miss Owens were like, oh yes, we have a problem with father absenteeism in the Black community.
Yes,
they acknowledge that. But to me, if you don't acknowledge the system, then you have to say that Black men must be inherently absent as fathers.
Yes, they must be inherently absent. How can you regulate that? And I think they're kind of defending themselves by saying, like, there's not a system. You're making Black people incapable by saying there is a system and telling them that they can't rise out of it. But either way, it's a system, because what system is telling Black people they can't get out of it?
Right.
Because either way, we're not getting out of it.
Right.
And Mr. Elder said, well, just someone needs to stand up and tell
those men to
go back home,
stay in the home.
And that's just so.
It just sounds very ineffective.
It does sound very ineffective. I don't know who they're referencing, but it does sound very ineffective. And I think the conversation about Candace Owens not latching on to the system that puts certain Black people in a particular scenario is one of the places where I have trouble understanding. And I would love for them to have a conversation and dig into that question, because on one side, I see that Candace does have very, very good points and she's intelligent. And I see that there are people who are just against Candace and anything she says because of the things that she disregards as it relates to race. And it's such an interesting conversation, because although we're going to talk about the victim mentality, and Candace definitely holds on to that, there's a lot of space for us to consider that people who have a history of being taken away from their families is going to impact generation after generation in some way. I don't know why we keep removing that from the conversation as if it has nothing to do with why we see Black men the way that we do when it comes to the household. But then there's also a very strong case that there are fathers who are in the household, and we're just considering the data. But for those who live everyday life and those who are coming across a lot of different families who don't have their fathers involved, it's very difficult for us to look at the data, because in everyday life and just running into conversations, we're seeing that more often. It could be the environment, or it could be that when you looked at the data, we're not going to find these men to submit that they aren't fathers, or we're not going to find a lot of census that's going to add that, yeah, I don't have a father. They might not even complete this. So I think this is there's a lot of room for us to consider that maybe there is a problem, and maybe we don't want to see the problem because we want to have a victorious mindset. But one of the things about having a victorious mindset is to be honest and true, and to consider all the different elements that a human can go through. And if people are upset and mad and trying to communicate that, yeah, there is a problem, then you can't just sit back on data. If anything, we might want to lean on to the word and what it says about communicating well, and, you know, not making strife with one another, and loving one another. Because I bring this up because when I hear some of this content from a Candace Owens or a Ben Shapiro or Charlie Kirk, I also hear that they are somewhat close to the Bible. And like for Candace, I know she says Christ is king a lot. I think the two other men, they have like biblical. Maybe I could be wrong, because it's very confusing when I see that these people who are on the Republican on a conservative side, they mention that they are biblical, but then their behavior and the way they approach conversations and how nasty they can get just doesn't give Christ. Now, I am one to know that Christ did turn over a table, or might have talked to the woman and called her a dog in the Bible. But I'm also considering that, was this the force that he always led with? And was there a season that he spoke that way or wanted to turn over that table that was for a reason that we should be passionate about? Like, we should be passionate about robbers in the church. We should be passionate about, you know, stealing people's joy and finding more ways to have a conversation to put people down instead of listening. And so when I hear people who are on both sides, when I hear them go back and forth and they're just being nasty with one another, how do we get to a place where we think, oh, if I just tell them that they're stupid, that's going to win them over? I'm pretty sure that people get won over by being called stupid. I'm pretty sure. I also think that there is a more intellectual way or a more wiser way to approach one another. If you truly, sincerely want people to hear your message, if you truly believe that we aren't victims, then there's a way to communicate. And I just don't think that people who so-called are so intelligent in this room can grasp that is that love is a golden key. And I don't know. Let's just keep listening, because I'm about to go on a whole different tangent.
And you have to have a voice that people are listening to.
Right.
I think that's something your mom mentioned as well.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a message that your people are gathering to.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise,
and the
there's
thing
something
is,
wrong with
I
your philosophy.
believe Miss Owens has a voice that people would hear.
Oh yeah.
I just don't know. I'm not sure what she's using it for at this point, like how she's benefiting her community with her voice. Although I'm sure she feels like she is. And
I think certain things she's saying, certain ideologies she would hold would be excellent for the Black community. She talks a lot about taking personal responsibility
and not having that victim mentality,
not having
right?
a victim mentality. I think that's an excellent understanding to have, but we've talked about this before, right? I mean, we don't want to have a victim mentality. We're actually not going to have a victim mentality, and we're going to be proactive about the state that we're in. But we're not going to deny the fact that there has been victims and victimhood in the past, or even at this very moment. We're not going to take that away. Both things can coexist. And it's just interesting because she's like this insanely intellectual
but
woman.
you know what, even in super extremely intelligent people, if they don't have the right language to express themselves, they'll say things they don't mean, I think. To me, that's what I
know, like, I've done it before.
Right. Like for her, like, okay, at one point she mentions in the conversation with Larry Elder that there's reverse racism in this country of basically of Black people treating white people poorly.
Yeah, she talks about how white people can't do so much stuff now because people are very triggered by white people.
Right.
And they can't say anything now.
Right.
You know?
But racism, as we know, is an intentional misnomer, as there's only one human race. So race is not a thing.
It's a social construct.
Racism is a system that puts the idea that there are different races, and in this system is the system that that oppressed Black people and elevated white
It's
people
what America
to also
was founded
oppress
on.
white people, but in a different way, by elevating them above their Black brothers. And you can't say there's reverse racism because there's no system that's elevating. There's no system that's elevating Black people, you know.
Mm-hmm. I think she would think that there is. I think she would think that Black people are being elevated above white people at this time because Black people can say things that white people can't.
I think you're right, but it's not a system.
No.
I mean, there is a. I shouldn't say I think there is. I think there's speech in the media. You know, everybody's talking about this. Everybody's talking about the race issue. And I think there's people in the media trying to reconcile it, and nobody really knows how.
Absolutely.
But they're doing it, and some white people are feeling guilty, you know, in ways that they shouldn't. You know, nobody should feel guilty. Everyone.
This is a really good conversation. This right here is something that I've noticed as I consume content online is there is this weird space where Black people, and this is not all Black people, but Black people are definitely grabbing on to this I'm not a victim mentality. So they're starting to elevate themselves. And some would say in good reason, because for so long they've been at the bottom because of this so-called system. And I just don't get why some people don't understand how the response to that system would create something like this. And when it comes to white people and white guilt, I find it to be so sad because I remember commenting on someone's page because she was crying or something, and she mentioned, like, I know I can't have these white tears, but what she was crying for, it was just a space for her to cry. And she had to think about crying and being a white woman online crying. And I was just thinking to myself, like, why are we doing this to one another? I do think that whatever has happened to a certain group of people is going to trickle down to the children and the impact there. And then they're going to rise up and be upset. But in some cases, we do also have to make space to believe that some of these children on the other side, they're not the enemy. They're the children of the so-called enemy, or the enemy that's, started the system or whatever to put themselves above others. But it's not directly their fault, and we're trying to go and attack them because they benefit from the system that was without balance. But at the same space, it's like people are just like they mentioned here, people are trying to reconcile, but no one really knows what they're doing. And this is how I feel when I'm in America, is that no one really knows what they're doing. Everybody's trying to figure it out, but the way that we're trying to figure it out is by doing the complete opposite of what we need to do, creating more division, creating more things to fight about, instead of realizing, like, maybe if we did start listening to one another. And it seems so simple. And I think that's the problem with this fear of, like, being intellectual or non-intellectual, is that we are forgetting how simple it can be. The practice of it is really where we're putting in the hard work. Like, it takes practice to show kindness. It takes practice to be patient, to be long suffering. It takes practice, especially when we're dealing with one another. And I think that's why we simplify those two commandments. It's like, really, if you focus on these two things, it really will work itself out. But we have a lot of stock in this intellect, and we think that that's really going to pull us through and make us seem better. But the wisdom of this world does, day by day, just seems to dwindle away, because I understand that people want to, use these big words, and I think it's really powerful and good that people are able to do so. But I think it would be most powerful and most impactful if I could see people combine this so-called intellect with behavior that edified other people. Like, how intelligent would you be if you can tap into the intelligence of love? Like, if you can tap into this behavior that actually lifts people up, instead of going on a whole what do you call it? Never mind, I'm not going to mention that. But instead of just using your words to pull people down or to find all of their flaws and all of their sins and just make them look the worst and not recognize that you have some things that you need to work on, I don't know. It's an issue. So on the self-awareness journey, I try to be mindful of that in myself as well. Where am I looking at people and finding so much fault? Like I am finding fault a lot where I don't think that people are putting enough effort into being mindful in their speech, especially online and creating content. But I can look at my own life and figure out things too. So one of the experiences that I'm going through now is just jotting that down. Like, what is making you so upset? And it's really been bringing me closer to wanting to create more content on YouTube, even though it's only been a few little people here. I'm so thankful for you guys being here lately since I switched up my content. But it's bringing me here because I'm understanding why it's so important for me to see people be more mindful in their conversation. And this, guys, is just a good conversation. So let's go ahead and continue.
One should acknowledge the effects of white supremacy, and from there we can work on it. But to just sit around and feel guilty and to talk about how bad white people are and how good black people are, like, to me, that's pointless.
That's pointless. It's very divisional.
But there's no system that's dragging white people from their land, destroying their men, taking them, separating the men, and like this, what happened in slavery times, and the effects that we're still seeing in America today. Believe it or not,
I mean, there is an attack.
There's
on white
no
people,
system like that,
but it ain't like that. The system doesn't reverse itself. It just doesn't flow the other way. Our country was built a certain way, and it really hasn't changed. And I think we can see that in the way that Black people have never really risen as a community. Now there has been those token Black people, right. that we hold up, and we hold on to them.
And there was a time when Black leaders were rising, but at the time that they were, getting ready to truly come together and stand together, they were killed. So the African American community has never really even had someone to stand up and say, this is what it means to be Black. This is what it means to be an African American.
Oh, so much. I love this conversation because I when we talk about these Black men and, these fatherless homes, even in the Black community and seeing so many single women, I believe that part of it is personal responsibility. I do think that we cannot neglect that there's personal responsibility. And the only reason I say this is because, and when these fathers are leaving, the mothers aren't just leaving, they are staying. So they are also in this Black community and they are doing what they need to do. On the other end, when we go back to Black men being ripped from their homes, that was the denominator, that they were the ones that's being ripped from their homes. So they were used to not having that. And maybe that's running down the genes. I'm not sure if it works like that. But I'm interested in you all and your response to personal responsibility versus society responsibility or system supporting that personal responsibility. Because actually I remember watching this debate for Jubilee, and it was a Ben Shapiro that was on there, and he mentioned the government helping when the fetus was in the womb, and it would be an incentive for men to stay. And I thought that was an interesting point to bring up, because would that be helpful if the government was supportive of fathers in the home and there was a incentive for fathers in the home and they didn't put the Black men in jail at the rate that they do? And there's a debate and things around that as well. But would the system help? And this system helping is such an interesting topic, because sometimes even online when we say, be careful of misinformation, be careful because people can do this and that, it's almost as if there's a group of people who don't know how to think for themselves, that they cannot make rational decisions, that they can come across a YouTube video with misinformation and that they're going to fail. I don't know if it's just me, but I do believe that people are capable of thinking. However, there are people who do crazy things based off of what we say. So just being mindful in our speech, I think that's a takeaway for me as I go through this with these young women.
So that was some of what we kind of got off on a tangent about Larry Elder and them, just because it was a really interesting.
We were so affected
the way
by
they
it.
framed it, yeah.
But like the whole reason that Miss Owens kind of came back into our like, okay, we need to say something, was recently when Miss Janet Jackson stood up and she didn't even say anything that offensive. I don't like. She said,
big.
I heard that Miss Harris is not even Black, and that's what Miss Janet Jackson said. And apparently everyone jumped up to shut her down, and they wanted to cancel her, and this, that, and the other.
Janet Jackson.
And Miss Owens said, you are not going to cancel Miss Janet Jackson. The effect that family has had on this country, and blah, blah, blah. And they tried to do that to Michael Jackson.
They killed Michael. They're trying to kill Janet. We're not letting that happen to them again.
You, sister. Like, she was like standing up for her. And to me, that was just so incongruous with her idea that there's no systemic racism. Why do you think if you think they killed Michael, why did they do it? Why are they coming for Janet Jackson? Furthermore, why are Michael and Janet Jackson some of the people that are understanding they don't really care about us, that are seeing the system? You know, like,
and that are calling it out for what it is.
It is the system that doesn't allow, that in general hides itself. So like for the most part, and this also is the thing that makes Candace Owens different, because she'll talk about, you know, how good her life is, and it is, but it wasn't always. But for the most part, Black people are able to acknowledge the oppression that have happened to us. But most often, white people aren't. The system hides itself because white people don't even have to acknowledge how they've been affected. And so it's often the Black people like Michael Jackson that are saying
that can bring
it's all about the money
for everyone, right?
Right. And so Brother Steph was like, did you all hear about that? And we were like, no, we didn't. So we went back and watched her talking about it. We're like, that just makes no sense. She says there's no system.
There's a system that is oppressing people and not allowing people to speak, right? It's causing people to not, and that would mean there is a system in place that is not permitting truth to come. That's not permitting people to say how they feel, but just then to like, I mean, she believes the education system is ruining people. She believes the democratic system is ruining people. But then to go on the other side and say the Republican Party is like gonna save us, it's just like,
that just assume it's not involved in the system.
How are you so passionate about the Democratic Party being systematic and oppressing Black people and not like seeing the other side of it at all?
Like at one point she says, like she's talking in their conversation, she says, what happened to BET? There used to be such good television programs.
And it's so accurate, right?
And it's like, yeah, what did happen to it? What happened to it?
Yeah.
Like it didn't disappear because one person disappeared it. It was a system in place ruled by people with power that could make that go away, that could make the only, Black entertainment now, people that are pushing negative images of Black females and Black males or immodesty or drugs or whatever images, instead of like
the TikTok trend, guns, drugs. You know what my parents say about them.
Yeah, literally. I'm just saying, like, what did happen to it? A system. A system.
Right, because like, I mean, like, I can see it in the community at large, but like, there is not, I mean, Black people are suffering and there's a lot going on, statistics say, but like, if we wanted to, we could promote something else. We really, really could. Like, there is upstanding citizens. There are people that are doing well.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
we just don't.
Systemic.
Our talent and our beauty and our ability and who we are as a people constantly flows out of our community without anything flowing back in. Like we haven't had a strong Black leader that lived long enough to be able to show us how to function as a community. And for Miss Owens to just talk about all the problems in the Black community which exist, and then to say that why is there even a Black community? Why are there problems in the Black community without a system?
Like, where did it come from? Why would there be? I literally don't understand it. Like, why would there be a problem? Right? That we always talk about the children on Black Wall Street weren't killing each other because I've heard her speak very passionately before about the
Black
most
on
people
black crime.
killing Black people was Black people themselves, right? So that would just reflect and that would just reflect a problem.
To me, that shows again, like, okay, so maybe there is a lot of Black on black crime. Why?
And like the answer literally cannot be as simple as because
Black people are killers or something crazy
or
like
Black
that?
people are Democrats. Like it can't be as simple as that, because there's Black people that are Republicans that got problems too,
Mhm.
and it's all involved in our community. And you can't. I don't think you can separate yourself. Like, you can't be a Black Republican and say, I'm not from the Black Democrats. They have a problem,
Right.
and they need to kind of get themselves out of it.
And even if Miss Owens thinks that, having a more Republican mind frame would help them to pick themselves up by their bootstraps or whatever, the expression is, how do you even get to that mind frame from the mind frame that they're in? Why are they starting in that mind frame? What and who is causing them to think that the Democratic the Democratic Party is better? Why are they gravitating towards it? So you think that Black people have a victim mentality? Why? Who gave it to them? Who told them to? Like, it's a system.
Yeah.
It's a system.
And that's something that's just kind of mind-blowing. So, like, it's just, like you said, completely incongruous.
And that's what we would love to talk to Miss Owens about if we ever got the chance.
Yeah. I would completely love and adore to talk to her about it.
Miss Candace Owens, if you ever see this, we would be so honored to have a conversation with you about it. We would love it. We would love it so much. We feel like we would agree actually on so many points, and you could help us understand your point of view better. And
we would probably learn. We would learn so much
from you. And we would like to share our point of view.
And I would love for her to explain this confusion that we're having. It's not necessarily a confusion in myself, but a confusion about what's going on.
And what she's actually trying to say.
Yeah, because I think that if we all got together and defined our terms, there would be so much less division. And I think that's the only thing that could be really wrong about a situation like this. People completely dividing and polarizing from each other, because the more we polarize and the more we refuse to talk to each other, the less problems get solved, the less we reach a resolution, the less help the Black community is in any way, shape, or form.
Less help we are to each other, and the less helped we are.
Absolutely.
If Candace Owens says it's the Democrats that are destroying Black people, right? Or that are giving them a bad mentality, how did they do that? Who gave them the control?
And I think the proof is really in the pudding. We voted Democratic. We voted Republican. No, we don't vote. But our country has voted Democratic. We've voted Republican before.
And we're still seeing these issues.
Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down, and it's going to swing. It's a pendulum, and that's kind of how it works. That's how cycles go. And I think we should just obviously be able to tell at this point that the answer cannot be simply
politics, a politician.
And I think really the only way,
political party, a political ideology,
to really fully and holistically explain something like this is to understand prophecy and history and how that's all intertwined, and what the Bible says is the resolution for everything. I think that is the only way to understand systemic racism and the way it works.
Because trying to prove a system or disprove a system using facts and facts and data, it never works.
Right, because people always try to say, prove systemic racism. Give me one fact, right? And it's way bigger.
It's way bigger than that. It houses those facts. That one fact actually proves nothing. You have to understand the whole story.
Facts could prove anything, but you have to have a narrative that tells you where those facts go, and like a whole story. Who is that character, and what do they mean to that character, and how does it all connect? With Stephen, often in his book Hustle Backward, he says it's like people were riding in a car and they're like,
prove to me that a car exists.
And we're like, well, we'll see this seat. And they're like, well, there's seats everywhere. There's seats everywhere.
See this belt buckle? I've seen many belt buckles.
Right. And they're just ready to, with any sort of fact. And I just think.
And Brother Steph says, if someone was asking me to prove the existence of a car to them, I wouldn't show them the steering wheel and the controls. He said, I would just drive. He said, and when I got to a nice fast speed, I'd ask them to jump out. And I think if Miss Owens all of a sudden started saying, if she tried to jump out, if she started saying, wait, the Republicans and the Democrats are wrong. There's a Republic and a Democratic plantation. These two parties are actually working together to destroy Black people. I think she'd see how fast jumping out would kill her.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying kill her as in her spirit or her. I'm just saying how fast they would kill her, how fast they would shut her down.
To be gone.
Yeah. Anyway, that's all we have. I hope that came across respectfully. We truly have great respect for Miss Owens, and truth be known, are somewhat intimidated of her. But we felt to speak about this because at the end of the day, we feel like we have the truth on it, you know. Absolutely. And I don't know what a conversation between us and her would look like, but hopefully one day we get the chance to find out.
And I think that they should have a conversation with Candace Owens. I know that politics is a very strong presence on this earth, and some who are faith-based may stay away from even the conversation or even voting because there is this belief system that this is not the world that we belong to. And although I understand that case, and then even in a lot of Candace Owens' rhetoric, she says Christ is king. I would love to see that impacted or reflected in her content and the way that she approaches her behavior. I see a lot of intellect, and I see some moments of mentioning, you know, faith, but there is something about the way that the delivery is just not thinking Christ is king, because Christ being king in the situation wouldn't even be leaning to one or the other. We're just leaning to what is the truth, what is going to be beneficial for everyone, and not trying to bring another person down because we don't want to see them in the house. What we should be doing instead of bringing people down is lifting up what you know is true and the faith that you say Christ is king in. And for those who believe in it, like, what should we really see? If we want people to come to Christ, should they see people going at it and making fun and stripping away? Like, should we just start behaving like it has an impact in our lives? Like the rulership of our lives is not ruled by the elements of this world, but is ruled by, like, we truly have this faith. And this is why I believe, and this is my opinion, that faith gets a bad rap, is because we can't see it in people. People are claiming that they are conservative and Republican or even Democratic and believe in Christ, but the way that they act and respond is just not giving it. And I can't say that I could be the person to walk out and say, like, you know, that looks like Christ, because, you know, sometimes, you know, people get on my nerves. But the practice of it is where I would want us to sit. But I wish the two the best. I just put this video together because I said I want to see the conversation. I've been waiting for someone who is very good with their words, who understand how to articulate the other side to Candace Owens in a way where it's a very thoughtful conversation. I'm not sure people are going to agree at the end, but I just want someone who doesn't seem like they don't have any intellect or wisdom or any guidance in their head, being the only one that I see going against these people who use a lot of data and facts. I just want to see someone who's able to really communicate in an effective way. This is what's going on, and this is the history on it. And I'm just advocating for it. And I don't know if the two, you know, I don't know, but I have a lot of hope that they will be very successful in this conversation. And the last thing I want to say is I chose this content today as far as like my balanced content dig, because as we can see, they do disagree or seemingly disagree with some of the concepts of Candace Owens, but they did not have to make fun of her. They did not have to say anything mean. They did not have to tear her down. They went about this content in such a mindful way where it can be received. And I would love to see more content where we don't have to just yell at people and say our way is right, but just thoughtful questions. They had a lot of thoughtful questions that came out of here. And I hope that it encourages you all to also have thoughtful questions as it did for me. And so I want to leave this video with one more question I'm going to put on the screen for us to reflect on. And it's this discussion about truth, because the ladies at the end said that they feel like they had the truth. How do we balance the confidence of holding on to our own truths with the humility to engage with others who think differently? If you were to have a conversation with someone with opposing views, how would you approach it to make it productive? And I have this question for you all, because if we start thinking about this before we actually start engaging in this conversation, we might have a reminder. Like, I wrote out how I want to show up in this conversation. I want to show up with fruit. I want to make sure I'm not condescending. I want to make sure I don't make fun of people. I want to make sure that when I do talk about data, that I do have some type of connection to the world to understand that data is not the entire story, right? There's the data that we can take of, and then there's this narrative in the story that we also don't see in the data that also has to be approached. Until next time, hold on to you as much as you can. Hold on to your health, your well-being, and your mind. Be mindful. Bye.